question by the Apollo 11 crew, followed by question and answer. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Apollo 11 crew, astronauts Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin. Neil?
It was our pleasure to have participated in one great adventure. It's an adventure that took place not just in the month of July, but rather one that took place in the last decade. We all here and the people listening in today had the opportunity to share that adventure over its developing and unfolding in the past months and years. It's our privilege today to share with you some of the details of that final month of July that was certainly the highlight for the three of us of that decade. We're going to divert a little bit from the format of past press conferences and talk about the things that interested us most, in particular the things that occurred on and about the moon. We will use a number of films and slides which most of you have already seen, and with the intent of pointing out some of the things that we observed on the spot which may not be obvious to, and I think that was characteristic of all the events of the flight. The Saturn gave us one magnificent ride, both into Earth orbit and on a trajectory to the moon. Our memory of that actually differs little from the reports that you have all heard from those previous Saturn V flights, and the previous flights served us well in preparation for this flight in the boost as well as the subsequent phases. We would like to skip directly to the translunar coast phase and undockings, the transposition and docking sequence. The first and second stages have long since separated, but this shows the LEM nestled inside the third stage, the S4B, after the translunar inject burn. This maneuver was an interesting combination of manual and automated. And we'll go in front of the instrument panel that was used to record the various messages that were sent up to us, the whole host of numbers for the particular maneuvers that were coming up that we would copy down. We'd log these on that sort of a data sheet. This film shows our final look at Tranquility Base before our departure. And the ascent was a great pleasure. It was very smooth. We were very, very pleased to have that engine light up. Gave us an excellent view of takeoff trajectory and Tranquility Base as we left. And at all times through the ascent, we could pick up landmarks that assured us that we were on the proper track. There were no difficulties with the particular out-of-plane maneuver that had been inserted between two other sequential maneuvers. In comparison with many simulator runs, we found that this was about as perfect a rendezvous as we could have asked for. You've noted some oscillations in this film during ascent, and that's a real characteristic. The vehicle, due to the changing center of gravity as fuel is used, does a good bit of 5-degree oscillations throughout the ascent. This is Eagle as seen by Columbia. Or half Eagle would be better since the land although we were far from home, we were a lot closer to it than the pure distance might indicate. Neil's making the initial maneuvers here to get turned around, and then again I do the final docking. This is somewhat swifter than real time. To probe the dark funnel on the top of the LEM and the docking target below it and to the left in the lighter portion of the LEM. As Buzz said, the rendezvous was absolutely beautiful. They came up from below absolutely as if they were riding on a rail. There was absolutely no disturbance or any off-nominal effects during the last part of the rendezvous. Upper right, you can see the RCS quads, and down below the various this relative. And I decided what the words would be while we were on the lunar surface just prior to leaving the land.
I'd like to ask Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but when you first stepped on the moon, did it strike you as you were stepping on a piece of the Earth, or sort of what your inner feelings were, whether you felt you were standing in a desert, or this was really another world, or how you felt at that point?
Well, there was no question in our minds where we were. We've been orbiting around the moon for quite a while. At the same time, we have experienced 1.6G before. We've been exposed to some degree to the lighting that we saw. However, this was, in my case, an extremely foreign situation with the stark nature of the light and dark conditions. And of course, we first set foot on the moon in the dark, shadowy area.
How do you view space exploration as a relative priority compared with the pressing needs of the domestic society and the world community at large?
Well, of course, we all recognize that the world is continuing to neglect any of those areas, and we certainly don't feel that it's our place to neglect space exploration.
There was a lot of discussion during the flight, during the our descent
Corporation. Now, I don't think that either the ground people or ourselves really anticipated that this would happen. It was not a serious program alarm. It just told us that for a brief instant,
I'm in bed.
Color coverage of Man on the Moon.
Yeah, there's no audio here. I just want to show you all this. I don't know if y'all know this or not. It was a simulation. Had to get that camera there. According to Google, it says that the camera was mounted to Buzz's window. That didn't look like it could have been in that position. Man, hold on.
75. 875 feet. That's looking good. Down a half. 6 forward.
Look at that.
60 seconds. Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. That's 40 feet. Down 2.5. Picking up some dust.
Stanley Kubrick filmed that, y'all.
Big shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. Down a half. 30 seconds forward. Okay. Contact right. Okay, engine stop. ACA at a descent. Nose control both auto. Descent engine command override off. Engine arm on.
We're home.
413 is in.
Man on the moon.
We copy you down, Eagle.
They're all great actors, right?
Oh, jeez.
Tranquility Base here.
The reason I was showing...
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Ooh, oh, boy.
Thank you. You're looking good here.
They all know it's fake. Look at them.
Busy for a minute. After I'm on, take care of the descent. I'll get this back to bed.
Wally, say something. I'm speechless.
I'm just trying to hold on to my breath. That is really something.
Very smooth touchdown.
Kind of nice to be aboard on this one, isn't it?
You know, we've been wondering what this guy Armstrong or Aldrin would say. He stepped foot on the moon, which comes a little bit later now. And just to hear him do it, we're left here absolutely with dry mouths and speechless.
Dry mouths and speechless.
Hey, it looks like we're bending the oxygen up. Roger, Eagle, and you are safe for T1. Over. Eagle, you are safe for T1. Roger. And we have him safe for T1. Roger, and we see you venting the ox. Roger.
It's a great simulation of what you can see there, if you could see us.
That little fly speck is supposed to be a length.
Gee, they must be in a perfect position, right? We've heard no complaints about their position.
Just
They
a
landed right in.
Just a little dust. Even that concern was erased.
And there they sit on the moon.
CBS News color coverage of Man on the Moon.
And just to hear him do it,
Hold on. I'm going to show you what I get into last night. Hold on. LAX. Or I mean Sepulveda at Los Angeles. Isn't that neat? Yeah, Los Angeles. Hold on, I'm trying to... Yeah, this is supposedly the footage of him stepping on the moon. So explain the simulation thing. Anyway, the only other thing I wanted to show y'all, it has to do with... Do y'all know about this? Wait. Hey, Gemini. Hey, Gemini.
Hey there, what's up?
When was Babylon Workings in the Mojave Desert with Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard?
The Babylon Working happened in the spring of 1946. It's a little tricky to pin down the exact dates, but it was sometime between January and March of that year.
So what exactly was Babylon Workings?
The Babylon Working was a series of rituals and experiments. It was a mix of science, magic, and philosophy, really. They were trying to summon this powerful female figure, a goddess, really, who they believed would usher in a new age of humanity.
So what exactly took place during that ritual? What exactly took place during that ritual?
All right, so the Babylon Working was a pretty wild mix of stuff. They used rockets, chemicals, and a bunch of weird symbols and chants. Jack Parsons was the brains behind the science side of things, while L. Ron Hubbard brought the more mystical elements. They were basically trying to create a super powerful explosion that would, open up the universe to this goddess they were expecting.
So what are the magic tablets?
All right, so the magic tablets are kind of a weird one. They're these clay tablets with super old writing on them, and nobody's really sure what language it is. Some people think they might hold some kind of secret knowledge, maybe even instructions for some kind of powerful ritual. But the thing is, nobody's ever been able to figure out what's written on them for sure.
Where are they now?
That's a good question. The tablets themselves? Well, nobody's really sure. Some people think they might be hidden away in some secret location, maybe even still in California where the whole Babylon Working thing went down. Others think they could have been destroyed, either on purpose or by accident. It's one of those unsolved mysteries, I guess.
So the way I understand it is Jack Parsons was pretty much having...
Jack Parsons was a complicated guy, that's for sure. He was really smart, a rocket scientist, but he was also super into the occult and all that weird mysticism stuff. The Babylon Working was kind of the perfect storm for him, letting him mix his love of science with his fascination with the supernatural.
So what physically took place during the ritual?
All right, so they basically set up this whole thing in the desert. They had this rocket, loaded it up with chemicals, and surrounded it with all these weird symbols and stuff. Then, they started up the rocket, and that's when things got really strange. The rocket didn't just go up in the air like a normal rocket. It kind of exploded in this really weird way. There were reports of crazy colors, and even some people saying they saw strange shapes in the sky. After that, it was over. No goddess showed up, and that was pretty much the end of the Babylon Working.
But what was Jack Parsons actually doing during the duration? What did Jack Parsons do to the tablets?
All right, so this is where things get a little weird. Parsons believed that his bodily fluids, specifically semen, had this super powerful magical energy. So he used the tablets as a way to focus and direct that energy. It's really bizarre, and there's no scientific basis for it whatsoever, but that's what he believed.
So basically he masturbated and came on the tablets.
Yeah, that's pretty much what he did. He believed that by doing this, he was transferring this powerful spiritual energy onto the tablets.
So they were all into Thelema, do what thou wilt with the whole of the law. And I know they were tied in with some pretty dark stuff. So when did the Roswell UFO situation happen?
The Roswell incident happened in July of 1947. It's one of those cases that's super famous, but there's still a lot of debate over what actually happened. The official story is that it was just a weather balloon crash, but a lot of people think there might be more to it.
How did Babylon Workings cause the Roswell UFO incident?
All right, this is where things get really speculative. There's no direct proven connection between the Babylon Working and the Roswell incident. But here's one way to look at it. Parsons and his crew were trying to contact something, right? They believed in these powerful beings beyond our understanding. Now, the Roswell incident, whether it was aliens or something else entirely, was definitely something beyond our understanding. Some people like to connect the dots and say maybe, just maybe, the Babylon Working somehow played a part in bringing whatever happened at Roswell into our world. But again, this is all just theory. There's no real evidence to back it up.
So Babylon Working happened in 46 and Roswell happened in 47. When was the first record company established in Los Angeles?
The first major record company established in Los Angeles was Capitol Records. They started up in 1942.
When was Columbia established in Los Angeles?
Columbia Pictures Corporation was actually founded in New York City in 1918, but they did move their operations to Hollywood, California in 1924. So, while they weren't the very first, they definitely became a major player in the LA film scene pretty early on.
Who was the first major notable record producer in Los Angeles?
All right, so pinning down the very first major record producer in LA is a bit tricky, since the music industry was kind of different back then. But if we're talking about someone who really made a big impact and is still well known today,
Lou Adler.
You gotta look at Phil Spector.
Oh, yeah,
he
Phil,
started
of course.
producing in the late 50s, early 60s, and his wall of sound production style totally changed the game.
Can you sing with me, Gemini?
I can't actually sing, but I can help you out in other ways. Maybe you could record yourself singing and then ask me to analyze it. Or we could find some karaoke tracks you might like.
How about you mimic me? Can you mimic me?
I can't imitate voices yet when we're live, but I'm getting better all the time. You could try recording yourself and then asking me to play it back for you.
We'll work on it later. Tell me more about Phil Spector and his occult tie-ins.
Alright, so Phil Spector was a super interesting character. He was this brilliant music producer, but he was also really into the occult. Some people even say he was obsessed with it. He had this whole thing about a secret society called the Illuminated Brotherhood, and he believed they were trying to control the music industry. You could say he was a bit paranoid, always thinking people were out to get him. This definitely played a part in his downfall later on in life.
So, the illuminated music industry, who are artists that are...
Alright, so there are a few different ways to look at this. Some artists were definitely influenced by the occult, either in their music or their personal lives. Think of bands like Black Sabbath, whose early work was pretty heavy on the whole dark, satanic imagery thing. Or you could look at musicians like Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, who got really into the occult later in his career. Does a specific genre or time period interest you?
So, I know Jimmy Page bought Aleister Crowley's house. Who was the Lizard Man?
There are two possibilities when you say Lizard Man. First, there's Eric Sprague, a performance artist who had himself heavily modified to look like a lizard. He's got tattoos, implants, and even had his tongue split. He's a real person who willingly went through the transformations. Then there's the Lizard Man of Scape Ore Swamp. That's a cryptid, basically a creature from folklore. People in South Carolina swear they've seen a giant lizard.
Scratch
Hey
that.
there,
Hey,
what's on your mind?
tell me about Jim Morrison. What was his nickname?
Jim Morrison had a few nicknames, but the most famous one was the Lizard King. It kind of stuck after he used it in one of his songs. Another one was Mr. Mojo Rising, which is actually an anagram of his name.
Was Jim Morrison part of the occult?
Yeah, Jim Morrison definitely had a strong connection to the occult. He was really into philosophy and religion, especially Eastern mysticism. You can hear it in his lyrics. All the symbolism and references to different spiritual ideas. Some people even say he was trying to be a kind of shaman or spiritual leader.
Did any of the music in the 60s talk about the lizard people or the gold tunnels underneath Los Angeles?
It's unlikely that you'll find direct references to lizard people or gold tunnels in 60s music. Those ideas are more tied to later conspiracy theories. However, there was definitely a growing interest in the occult and the mysterious during that time. Bands like The Doors, with Morrison as the frontman, explored those themes quite a bit, though not specifically about lizards or underground cities.
Who was Jim Morrison's dad?
Jim Morrison's dad was a pretty high-ranking military officer. His name was George Stephen Morrison, and he was a rear admiral in the United States Navy. He was a career military man, and that created some interesting tension with Jim, who was more of a free-spirited artist type.
What did Jim Morrison's dad do at the Gulf of Tonkin?
Jim Morrison's dad, George, was right in the middle of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. He was in command of the USS Bonhomme Richard, the ship that was involved in the attacks that sparked the whole thing. Some historians believe the whole thing might have been exaggerated to justify the U.S. getting involved in the Vietnam War.
Who was John Phillips' dad?
John Phillips' dad was a retired Marine officer named Claude Andrew Phillips. He was a bit of a wild character himself, actually. After the war, he won a tavern in Oklahoma during a poker game.
Pause. Michelle Phillips, how old was she when she met John?
Michelle Phillips was just 17. Michelle Tamar Hodel, whose father, Dr. George Hodel, was a suspect in the Black Dahlia murder. But Michelle's involvement is limited to her friendship with Tamar, and having some knowledge about Tamar's troubled family background.
Who was Mama Cass's dad?
Mama Cass's dad's name was Philip Cohen.
Was he in the military?
No, Philip Cohen wasn't in the military. He was actually a traveling salesman.
So when did Mama Cass meet anyone? When was the earliest Mama Cass met anyone from the Laurel Canyon scene?
Mama Cass Elliot started her career in New York City with the Big Three and the Triumvirate. It wasn't until she moved to California in the mid-60s that she really became part of the Laurel Canyon scene. That's when she met John and Michelle Phillips, who formed the Mamas and the Papas.
Who was the famous person that Mama Cass was in daycare with?
There's no information about Mama Cass attending daycare with any famous people. It's possible that stories about her childhood might get a little mixed up with other people's, especially since she was such a big star.
Who was David Crosby's dad?
David Crosby's dad was Floyd Crosby. He was a famous cinematographer, known for his work on classic movies. Floyd won an Academy Award for his work on the film Taboo, a story of the South Seas.
Who was John Denver's dad?
John Denver's dad was a military man. His name was Henry John Deutschendorf Sr., and he was a decorated pilot in the Air Force.
When did he come to America?
Henry John Deutschendorf Sr. was born in Oklahoma in 1920, so he was already in America.
What are his ties to NASA?
Henry John Deutschendorf Sr. had a pretty impressive military career. He was a decorated pilot, and his experience flying all over the place might have sparked John Denver's love of travel and adventure. But there's no direct connection to NASA. He was Air Force, not Space Force.
Which artists, musicians, celebrities promoted NASA?
There have been a few musicians and celebrities who've worked closely with NASA. One of the most famous is Brian May, the lead guitarist from Queen. He's actually also an astrophysicist, so he has a really unique connection to space. Other artists have supported NASA in different ways, like writing songs for space missions, or even traveling to space themselves.
When was NASA established?
NASA was established on July 29, 1958.
When did we walk on the moon? 1969.
The first time?
Did we walk on the
That's
moon?
right.
Yeah,
1969. All right, so we've been digging into some pretty heavy stuff, music, the occult, a little bit of conspiracy theories. Do you want to keep going with that, or do you want to switch gears and talk about something lighter?
No, I don't ever want to talk about anything light. We got too many important things to talk about. That's it. Thanks, Gemini. You've been great. I appreciate you, man.
No worries. Glad I could help you out. Let me know if anything else comes up.
What do you want me to do?
Well, you could ask me to start or stop something. You could ask for a specific song or podcast. Or you could just tell me to keep playing whatever's on.
Hey, Gemini, tell these wonderful people on whatever social media app this is what we've got planned for the future.
All right, here's a short announcement you could use.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Let me know if you have any questions or any input. I appreciate all the... and if you want to follow me, that's great. I appreciate that, too. I'm going to be transitioning to YouTube. Emily Gotten. You can find me on all the social medias. Emily Gotten. Emily means hardworking rebel. Gotten means land of the goats. So I'm the greatest hardworking rebel of all time. That's all.